saw you was before the pandemic, and I think we went out to lunch or something, or breakfast or something.
I think we went to Manny's, didn't we?
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. And I had some horrible locks there, but
I
yeah.
was just gonna say, I always think about, I love
Great.
Manny's, but you hated the locks there.
Yeah, I was like, wait, this is a Jewish deli, and yeah, the locks were like rotten, whatever. I'm sure that was just an off day, but so yeah, so what's happening? I mean, since the last time we talked in 2013, and if I go to our podcast page, let's see, if I go to my podcast page, you were working at WGN at the time, and you had worked in sports radio, of course, and you're at Zanies now. I mean, you were at Zanies then too, but what's been going on lately?
Well, I'm still at Zanies. I've been there for many, many years, since 2006. And I'm not working at WGN right now. As everyone in broadcasting found out, as people started working from home during the pandemic, they just didn't need as many people. Mm-hmm. And I was one of the casualties. My past worked to get me into the building for ages, though.
Yeah. And then what were you doing at WGN before the pandemic?
Oh, well, I used to fill in a lot on, as a producer on a bunch of the different shows. But my main gig was I would always work the football shows with Dan Hampton and Ed O'Bradovich and Glenn Kozlowski. I did that for years and loved working with those guys. Right?
Wasn't Jim Memolo? Yeah.
Jim Memolo was part of it from time to time. But, I also did a weekend sports show there. Produced that with Memolo and Kozlowski. So I did a lot of different things over a long time. I started there in October of 2003.
Wow. And so what was that like to work on that show? I used to see you, by the way, all the time.
Which show? The football show?
The one with, the football show.
Oh, the football show. Well, you loved it.
Yeah.
Because we'd always get food.
Very good food. I don't know how you scored that.
Well, the funny thing is, when we first started, they had done years before, when I first started, they would do a Bears show, a pre and post game show, and they called it the Three Bears. It was Ham Murray was hosting it with the guys. And Pete and I know a lot of restaurateurs. So we were like, we got to feed these guys. Why don't we call a bunch of our friends in the restaurant business, see if they'll give us free grub? And we benefited. You benefited. I just saw something pop up. It was like popped up on Facebook Memories or something just today about how this could easily have been.
Was it?
No, it wasn't the donuts. Yeah, it was. I think it was a Harry Carey's meal when they drop stuff off, and it's like this would easily be a $50 meal. And that's 10 years ago or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. And that was very nice of you guys to let me eat too, because I worked at another show with Bill Mahler, and then you guys were basically after, and I just took advantage. I just hung around and ate really good food. So.
Well, we always ordered more because we knew, every people listening and watching know that a broadcast isn't just the people on the air. There's a lot of other people involved. There's producers, engineers. There's just people around that are very, vital and integral to the broadcast. They need to be taken care of as well.
Yeah. And what was it like to work with those football pros?
They were great. They could be a handful sometimes because they were so passionate about the game and the sport. And sometimes you'd have to steer them in a positive direction to do a broadcast. Rather than just a lot of screaming and shouting, but they were always tremendous to work with. And in fact, I'll probably go in, a couple times, later this season just to see Hamp and OB because I love those guys.
Yeah, and I'm just putting a link to our live stream on Twitter in case you want to share it. But what are they like? Like, what was it like to watch the game with those pros? I mean,
well, it's amazing. I played football in high school. I watched football growing. My dad did security for the Bears.
Wow.
So I used to go to Bears games all the time as a kid. And so I thought I knew football. I know crap. When you're sitting with these, one's a Hall of Famer, one's with like an OB, a potential Hall of Famer, Glenn Kozlowski, who is, one of the great special team players of all time. the things they would spot, it was just amazing. Quite a lesson, and very much a treat. So many radio and so many of the execs and the salespeople who would happen to be in the building while the show's going, while we're watching games, and they'd be yelling and screaming, and it was very passionate and very interesting stuff. But it was not safe for broadcast. Not safe. Some of the things they would say. And so, some of the people would have maybe we should sell this as a show. We could put like a camera on. I'm like, you know what? I think the guys will shut up and they'll go to another room and watch the game.
Yeah, because that's true, because they just want to be themselves watching the game.
Right. And there were things they were saying that, they wouldn't want people to say about them as a player. So, they were just passionate fans.
But when they were speaking that way, though, was it about the game itself, or was it just about life? Like, hey, whatever.
Oh, about the game. But generally, if it was a boring game, sometimes you get off on the topic of whatever was going on in the news or politics or whatever.
Yeah.
But generally, it was the game. I mean, they were, laser focused on the game.
Yeah, so it must have been really fun. It must have not felt like work, because you're watching this you're eating excellent food and you're watching with these fun people.
It was never work. I didn't think. I thought it was a blast. I mean, and we were talking about the food. So many people always was like that's your main function, is make sure they have food. But then after a few years, the station decided, you know what, we're losing an opportunity. So they decided to contact restaurants themselves and make that a sponsorable thing. So they would have restaurants provide, they would pay a fee to have the right to provide us food. And it was pretty solid. Wasn't what we were doing, but whatever you can to help pay the bills, right?
Yeah, that's good. And then and also when you were at the Score, though, how was that different than working at a talk station that had sports? That's part of it.
Well, I had never worked at a sports complete sports station until then, and there weren't that many, because I was there right from the beginning when we went on the air on January 2nd, 1992. There weren't a lot around the country. So, but you threw all these type A, muscle heads, like we all are in some degree, into this room, and there was a lot of testosterone. We were also, it was owned by Diamond Broadcasting at the time, and you probably know that they owned WXRT.
Oh yeah.
So we were at 4949 West Belmont in the bunker. It's this brick bunker out on the northwest side in the middle of nowhere on Belmont Avenue, just past Cicero Avenue, and with the tower on the roof. So no wonder I couldn't have kids for years. But
you can still see it. Can you still see it from? I think I can still see it from the expressway.
I don't know if you can see it, but you definitely can see it. It's definitely still there. I was there, not that long ago driving. I'm like, I'll drive over and take a look. But that was like a powder keg of locker room shenanigans. That's
what I tell people.
And so many of the things that people did on the air, and I can't go into specific because I'm not thinking of a specific. It's not that I refuse to, it's just I can't think. But I just know with the way society has changed, there's a lot of things we couldn't have done on the air that we did. And it's probably for the better.
Yeah, but even off the air, because sometimes they'll say to me, "Oh, it used to be radio used to be so fun." Da da da. I'm like, yeah, because you're a dude, and I don't know if you weren't some kind of dude, like then maybe it wouldn't have been as fun, because were people saying things to you that were racy and they were assessing, how you look or how you might perform or whatever. I mean, really, is that the good old days of radio? Or that's
there weren't many women in the building. So it was definitely a boys' club. So, so it's unfortunate that we all probably succumbed to that to some degree, but hopefully most of us have learned and evolved.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having, a bunch of guys together, but when people talk about the good old days, it's like yeah, you're also getting away with a lot. And don't gaslight people who disagree with you, because it really is disrespectful. Like, how would you feel if it was flipped and there are a bunch of women and they're constantly analyzing you and so forth?
Oh, I agree. I agree. I
Um,
agree. It was, we've progressed, hopefully somewhat,
yeah.
you
But
know.
then people will
Yeah.
say, oh, it's boring and so forth. But then I think, let's flip it. Okay. You come in here and I'm going to make comments about you and I'm going to talk about, it's just, I think when you're actually going through it from a different perspective, then it makes you think differently.
I don't think some shows, and I'm not just talking sports radio, I'm talking shows in general. Shows are boring, not because you can't comment on a woman.
Right.
It's not that. That's easy. That's lame. You know,
Yeah.
that's low hanging fruit. It's like, think a little harder and try to come up with something clever to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a lot of experience producing and being in radio. So what do you think is a good show? How do you define a good show?
Um, I think a good show is one that is entertaining, informative, and interactive. Um, and you notice I didn't say anything about ratings or anything about that, because that's a whole different thing, But as long as you're engaging your audience in whatever format you're doing, it could be a music format, a talk format, a sports format. But if you're engaging your audience, you're providing them with information they can't get or would have difficulty getting. You're taking them places that they, as individuals, would never be able to get to, like in a sports and inside a locker room. In a news, I mean, are you still working at WB? Are you still working in news?
Yeah. I work at WBBM. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
But
in a
I
news
work on the production
situation,
side. So I don't
well,
work
right. But you're still part of
Yeah.
a major team there
Mhm.
that's bringing information and facts to on things going around the world. But I mean, with the hurricane going down in Florida right now, you can take people down there. I think sometimes it becomes theatrical a little bit with TV as people are standing as the wind's blowing them
Right.
in the waters, But uh,
But specifically for talk radio, for instance, or sports, how do you actually make it interesting and compelling and like locker room, but entertaining? You know what I mean?
well, you have to bring something. You can't just say the obvious. I mean, yeah, okay. Do the Bears stink? Does the mayor stink? Whatever, depending on what format you're doing in a talk, in a spoken word format. You have to bring, I think it's kind of overused. A hot take. Hot
Yeah.
take seems, I don't like the term, but you have to think about things outside the box. Don't just go with your first thought. Come up with something that's a little compelling that maybe your audience didn't think about
Mhm.
before, and can give them a little clarity on whatever subject you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's not easy. I mean, that's not simple.
No.
That's not simple. I mean, when you're writing a news story, you're not just, I mean, yeah, you want to give the facts, but you want to give some that can, that can be important to a person's daily life in some manner. Correct.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also,
Yeah.
I mean, I think with talk radio, first of all, there aren't many people who can do it. It's very, very hard because I think talk radio should be topical and plug into what's going on now, but not be predictable in opinions and so forth. And you bring in good guests that bring it forward.
Well, right. Like what I just said. Hey, this team stinks. That team stinks. The mayor is this. Pritzker is that.
Right.
Trump is this. I mean,
Yeah.
we can all say that. Anyone can say that. And so, you know what? Maybe they can, they can do it on their own somewhere else.
Right.
I'm working in comedy right now. So like every comedian I work with has a podcast. Now you've been doing podcasts forever and you do it well. So
Thanks.
please
Coming from
don't
you, because
take
I know you're
offense.
critical.
Yes.
But,
I'm
yeah, because
critical.
I know that
No.
coming from you, you're very critical. But wait, actually, on your phone, you're cutting in and out. Is there a way to get a better connection? Or maybe it's your Wi-Fi or something?
I don't know. Could be.
I
How
mean,
is it now?
well, I mean, just the audio, but that's okay. We'll just work with it. But
Okay.
because sometimes
Okay.
you can't say, but anyway, yeah. So with Zany's, I was there the other night. I texted you like, hey, and I took a picture.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to see you that.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about you because yeah, my student performed there and so he invited me and some other people, but oddly he didn't know I was there until the next day. And I guess Monday night is new material night.
Well,
And
there's a variety of things we do there, but that's one thing. Yeah. Yeah.
and basically I was up for listening to comedy, good or bad, whatever, but practically every person who went up there basically insulted us because I guess our crowd was more subdued and they didn't like that. So they kept reminding us that we're tough, we're so quiet, what's up with this crowd? And I thought that's sort of amateur to do that.
Well,
And then,
even some seasoned veterans do that, and I think that's a bit of a cop out. But you shouldn't, yeah, there are going to be bad audiences, but also there's going to be bad performers too sometimes.
yeah, because
And
we
you
felt
can't
like,
just blame the audience. Try to figure out what to do to bring them back around.
yeah, because it wasn't the audience wasn't rude at all. The audience was into it, but they were just not expressive. And basically there was a pro at the end and he didn't insult anybody at all. And he actually worked with the group and he was
That
really
was Calvin Evans, right?
the guy from LA, Puerto Rican guy.
Oh, okay. No, okay.
So but yeah, he was excellent. I have to remember his name, or look up his name, but he was really good because he knew how to work with whatever audience was in front of him. So but yeah,
Yeah,
Zany's, yeah.
that's what you have to do. You can't just blame the audience. Yeah, maybe the audience wasn't giving you what you were looking for, but maybe you weren't giving them what they wanted.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what's because that's why I sort of I thought because I thought, well, you're the entertainer. We're not supposed to work for you. So stop stressing us out. And also sometimes you're just not funny. So maybe you should take a hint and change your act. I think they liked it. I think the audience liked it better when people were interacting with them instead of just doing jokes all the time.
Okay. Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, it's definitely a conversation when you're on the stage and talking to the audience because you have to read them and kind of see what kind of a journey they want to go to. They may have had a terrible day. It was a Monday. It was Monday, you said.
Monday night. Yeah. And they kept telling us. Yeah.
It was the start of the week and everyone's like, oh gosh, we got the whole week to go. So, audiences can be fatigued, or
But
if it's
also,
like a late show on the weekend, they're all drunk.
yeah,
So.
because I was talking to somebody and they said, yeah, I was at this other comedy club and the audience was laughing at everything. I'm like, yeah, it's probably because it was Saturday night, it was packed and they were drunk. So
It could be, or maybe the comics were just funnier. Maybe they just connected with that audience in a way that the audience needed at that moment.
now, have you ever done comedy yourself?
I've done MC work, but I've never done stand-up. No.
Okay, but the MC, when you're the MC, do you actually have to tell jokes at all, or are you just
Well, when you're at a comedy club, I've MC'd like live events, charity events, all kinds of stuff like that. I've done a couple comedy nights, but that was more just to keep the thing going because they were comedy charity events.
Okay.
So just make sure you do this, make sure you buy the raffle tickets, okay. And now I'm bringing up this person, so yeah, I tried to say something amusing, but was I amusing? I don't know. I don't think I can do it. It's a really, I mean, you really have to, I mean, people are paying to be entertained. And if you're not entertaining, you can just see the dead in people's eyes,
Right.
So,
yeah, that's true. That's why the people who are pros, I mean, it's really incredible how they're able to do that. But yeah, what is your experience with these professional comedians?
Well, I work with them, most of them very closely. Not every comedian that comes to. I am the publicist for Zany's Comedy Clubs, and we have locations in Chicago. Been there for many, many years, since 1978. It's at 1548 North Wells, just south of North Avenue, and then we have one in Rosemont, in that entertainment district where the high fly, where you can pretend you're falling out of an airplane, and they have a dueling band or dueling banjos, dueling pianos, and all that type of stuff over there. And so I've been doing that for a long time, and it's been good. What was your exact question? I've lost track now.
Well, no. Well, first of all, what's the difference between the Rosemont location and the Chicago one in terms of vibe or whatever?
Well, the city location has been there, as I said, since 1978, and that is it's smaller, as you saw, lower ceiling. It just oozes history, because as you walk in, there's just headshots of superstars and never made it. All over the wall, and it's all people who have performed at Zanies. So pretty much everybody who has had much success in stand-up comedy since 1978 has been on that stage at one point or another. So that audience, people have known that place, so they'll go in knowing that it's an old school comedy club, and that they are there to laugh. They're not there to get fancy food. They're not there to get, they're just there to laugh and have a drink or two. And we do serve food, but it's not dinner, And the audience tends to be a little younger because they live in the city.
Yeah. Most of our audience, I'd say, was in their 20s.
And so we try to bring comics that would attract that audience, but we'll bring we'll bring the legends in there as well as they come. Now Rosemont, newer club, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary in July. That is a bigger room. It's where Zanies in Chicago is a longer room, long and narrow. The room in Rosemont is wide, and it holds about 250 people, where the city location only holds about 130. And we tend to get, some more marquee names or rising, bigger star types.
So what's it like to work with those stars?
Well, working with the comedians, and I try to work with them at the different stages of their career. Like tomorrow, I'm going to be working with and taking a comedian to some TV interviews. Zainab Johnson, who, I don't know, did you watch the TV series, the Greg Daniels series Upload?
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, well, Greg Daniels, he did so many major shows, Parks and Rec and The Office, and he's part of The Simpsons and all that. But she's one of the recurring stars on that show. I will take her to some things, but I'll work with them as they need to, especially established people like that, to help get them well known in the market. I'll introduce them to people, media types, try to get media types out to the shows, try to set up interviews. And the younger comics, though, I will try to get them to learn what it takes to be a professional. And that means that it isn't all show. There is business in show business. And part of that is the promotion of the shows. And the promotion is just as important to the individual performers as it is to the clubs and others. So I'll work with them on how to do interviews. I will work with them on making sure that they're doing their part by keeping, so many comics nowadays, they are so lucky with all the social media and stuff, and that they can promote to the people who have already expressed an interest in them. So they can let people know, hey, I'm in Chicago, I'm at Zanies this night to this night. So I'll just encourage a lot of that. And, from everything from let's get a video of you saying, come to Zanies that we can share on ours and you can share on yours, to, helping younger comics know, what it means to set up an interview.
Oh, wow. Now, how do you book people on shows? Is it hard to get people on TV shows in Chicago?
It can be. It can be. I mean, the hardest part is getting to know who's the person who can say yes. So you just have to, and that was a benefit of me coming out of the media world. Since I worked in radio, so many people we worked with move on to TV or move to a newspaper or move on. People move around in the media landscape. So I know a lot of the people who are producers or hosts of things. So I'll just contact them and they'll, oh, well, that's not me. Contact this person instead. Or, there are other professional resources that you can use for that. But it's all about, knowing people and having them trust you and you trusting them, that they, if you bring a big star, if I have Drew Carey, they're going to take, we're going to get Drew Carey on. That's a no-brainer, but it's some of these other people I can contact people that I know and say, hey, I think this person, could be somebody you might be want to know in the future because I think they're pretty good. So you might want to put them on your show, and I'll explain. And I can't force it to a guest to go on a show because if I force a guest, it's going to sound terrible because they don't want, the show doesn't want them. The guest doesn't know, so it'll just be clumsy and it won't be successful for the show and or us. We won't, so the clubs just have to trust us. I set up an interview for a couple weeks from now, a kind of a rising star, a guy named Aaron Weber. He's a big sports fan. He's a Notre Dame graduate. He lives in Tennessee. And he's a big baseball fan. So I contacted some of the sports media, and Dave Kaplan on NBC Sports, his show Unfiltered. They were like, oh yeah, he might work and, explain a little. And so
Wait, sorry, you're breaking
because some
up.
of that trust I think, or I hope gotten with working with them, this would be a good guest for you. So, and then they trust me enough to do that, to take them. So we're going to have that gentleman on in a few weeks when he comes to town.
Yeah, and then what do you think? First of all, you're breaking up. Sometimes you're lagging, you're freezing.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
It might be
it's better to use. Yeah, it could be your Wi-Fi. That's why people usually use a computer. But when you what do you think?
Don't be critical. You're bullying me.
Right. I'm just pointing out. I'm just pointing out the obvious. I'm aware.
Well, I'm not aware, so you've got to let your audience know. I understand.
Yeah. But anyway, so when you think that somebody's up and coming and good, how do you know? What's your criteria?
It's a gut thing. I just think somebody might be good, and in some cases, I just think there's somebody who I know he or she does a bit, or they're interested in a certain thing, and I'll know a media person who might be interested in that, and I'm like, they might get along. Wow. This might be a good thing. Mm-hmm. So, I just keep mental notes on things like that.
And then why do so many comedians have podcasts? I know because of Mark Maron, he really hit it big. Is it because of him or what?
Well, Mark Maron, he was definitely one of the early adopters. Then there's also another guy from Chicago who used to work for Conan. He does a podcast called Never Not Funny. He's done that for years. And Adam Carolla was an early adopter. But everybody now, it's like anything else in entertainment or in business in general. When you see something successful, you want to imitate it. Mm-hmm. So everybody wants to be Rogan now. Everybody wants to, especially after he sold his company to, for so much money. Right. So, in fact, Joe Rogan was just at Zany's about a month or so ago. He was in town to do multiple shows at the Chicago Theater. And he said, hey, I just would love, he's like, I played the different Zanies around, but I never played the City Club. Wow. I'd love to do it. Can I come in a day early? And would you let me go up on stage? And our bookers were like, of course we will.
Wow.
So
how was that? So he did stand up or he just did a performance?
He did stand up. He was a stand up long before he was on news radio and became a UFC announcer and, and the podcaster.
That's incredible. So how was that show? Did you see it?
It was, the audience got what they came for, and they loved it. They loved it. Yeah. It was, and he was very respectful of you never know with some big stars like that, and people who are in the news like that. But he was very terrific with our staff, and that goes a long way.
Wow. So did you ever find out from these successful people how they create their content to be so successful?
Well, some of them, yeah, because I've worked with some of the people I've worked, because like I said, I've worked at Zanies since 2006. So some of the people I worked with, and they were just road dogs, like so many comics, just slugging away, trying to become famous. Some of the people I was working with early were Sebastian Maniscalco, who now sells out basketball arenas. Wow. Kevin Hart, who now sells out basketball arenas. Bill Burr, who now sells out basketball arenas. Jim Gaffigan, Chelsea Handler. Those are just some of the names that I've worked with as they. And the one thing I have found about all those comedians is how hard they work.
Yeah.
They were constantly thinking of their act. They were constantly writing and rewriting. Mm-hmm. They were constantly thinking of what they could do to get another person in the seats. And that is the one thing that I think differentiates from a lot of comics, that just the hard work they put in. And yes, it's an art form, but like I said before, it's also a business, and you've got to work on that part as well.
And so some of these people,
and there's a million times of luck too. I know some comics who are probably cracked me up more than anybody, but nobody knows who they are. They just didn't get the break, or they were self-sabotaging, or whatever, a million things, or they just didn't happen for them.
But then also with social media, though, you'd think that they would post their stuff. Like that's how Russell Peters got famous, because he, people recorded his stuff on YouTube, and then they posted it, and then he just became really big. So you think
Russell Peters had always been hovering around, he was always a pretty successful comic there for the last 15, 20 years. He had a number of, TV appearance. He was one of the judges on Last Comic Standing on NBC. And he is huge out of this country, because I know a number of comics he brings along to be opening acts, and these are headliners in the United States. These are killers on stage. These are good comics, but Russell's not afraid. He'll bring great comics with him, and then they'll play throughout Asia, and they're selling out 20,000 seat arenas.
Yeah. But with the people who didn't make it, though, are they posting their stuff online, or is it just they don't get a break in real life?
Yeah. And nowadays they all are, but some are maybe they're just not posting the right things. Maybe they haven't met the right manager. Maybe they've upset someone. There's a million things that could go wrong in any career, not just in entertainment.
Yeah, and also, in Chicago we have Can TV. There are like 5 channels that are local access. Yeah. And late at night they show comedians, and it's really good because some of the comedians are really, really good and they're more obscure. And it gives a lot of exposure to those people,
Well, I'm thinking that, I'm an older guy now, but we used to always watch the cable access channels. I don't know if they still have it like they did back in like the 80s, where you would see the strangest things sometime, and the craziest and the funniest. And
we have the Can TV. That's in Chicago. We have Can TV, and there's some really bizarre stuff, but they do have this whole comedy thing, all these stand-ups, and it gives them a platform. I don't know if they've done anything recently, but a lot of their stuff is probably from a few years ago. But on Can't
Yeah, I
TV,
know
yeah, you can just
there was one you could get out in the suburbs, Psychobabble, that was hosted by a local comedian named Mike Preston, and it was outrageous. And he would always get different company, but it was more like a talk show format.
Mhm.
And they would get just these wacky. They've created all these different guests, and then they would go out and about and interview crazy people, celebrities and non-celebrities. So that was always fun to watch.
Well, when you knew those people before they became big, what were they like when they weren't famous? And then what were they like after they got famous? Did they change?
Not really. It just they're still hardworking, and it's just that I was just texting with a comic this afternoon who is performing at the Chicago. He sold out the Chicago Theater tomorrow night. A guy named Chris Stefano, and he's got a very successful podcast. And he is just the same guy. It's just he has less time. He's busier because he's doing bigger shows. He has more commitments. He has because his team has gotten bigger and his fame has gotten bigger. He's got more obligations than he had when he was just, so many comedians, what they do is they perform for an hour and then they have 23 hours to do nothing, So, as they get more famous, they have more. But he is still the best, like this one specific guy, Chris, just a terrific guy. We were talking about, I'm going to maybe go to the show tomorrow night. So.
And is it true that a lot of comics are like self-deprecating, or they just sort of there's like this self-dread going on?
Well, there's all types of people in comedy. The thing people always say is, oh, they're all depressed and they're all this and they're all dented cans and they're all it's not true. Yeah, you're just like any other profession. You're going to have people of all sorts, and the comedians are no different. No different.
And then do they still say that women aren't funny? Because I remember that was a thing. Okay.
Some do, and I disagree. Some of my most favorite comedians are women. There, Judy Gold. I don't know. Do you know Judy Gold? She's a more seasoned performer, and she is just a killer. There's a woman we've got coming up in November, Jessica Carson. She didn't travel a lot. She did a lot of writing. She's a New York-based comic. She did a lot of stuff on the Howard Stern show, a lot of voices and characters and stuff on that through the years. And her name's Jessica Carson, and she is the best. She's one of my all-time favorites. And she just put out an album with kind of like a Jerky Boys, like a prank phone call type things, with another comic named Rachel Feinstein, who again is so incredible. So those are just three national comedians. If you haven't checked them out, do check them out on YouTube, check out their podcast, and definitely go see Jessica when she comes to Zanies in November.
Yeah. And then for the podcast, are they doing comedy on the podcast, or is it more straight? They're just discussing stuff.
It depends. Okay. Most of the time, they're just discussing things and trying to be amusing on a topic or not. And that's where, like you and I, and in a lot of cases, I help a lot of the comics because I've worked. To me, it's a talk show. They're doing a talk show in a different format. It's just not being broadcast. So when you have three comics that are all talking at the same time, and a listener or a viewer can't understand anything they're saying, somebody's got to point that out. And someone in a professional like me, or someone who's worked in that professional capacity, can say, hey, maybe you had a good point, but nobody heard it.
Right.
It's because they're so funny, but nobody heard it.
It's also because people are used to seeing video or TV, and they can all talk at once. You can just sort of look. But yeah, I do tell the students at Columbia too. I say it's really, really amateur to talk over each other. And I give them examples. I say, this sounds really casual, but do you see how they're setting it up? there's a dominant voice, the others react, and this person takes the dominance. And I said, so don't think that just because they're talking, you can do the same thing and you can just talk over each other. They're planning it. They're
right.
organizing.
And the better comedy podcasts, they understand that or have been taught that. They have learned that. Yes, you don't have the constraints and the confines of over the air broadcast radio, so you can swear and your topics can be a little more provocative and that type of stuff, but you still have to say something interesting. You have to say it in an interesting way, you have to say it in an entertaining way, and people have to understand what you said.
Yeah. And then what other tips do you have for shows or like audio shows or radio or whatever?
My thought is I think for comics nowadays, especially, and for budding broadcasters, because the opportunities in over the air are less and less, this will be a good opportunity for you to work out some of the kinks, work out your interviewing techniques, to work out your booking abilities. You work out your, again, when you're on the air, you're not just you're a version of you.
Yeah.
If it's just me who's, gonna go rake the leaves and gonna make some dinner, that can be interesting, I guess, but you have to you've got to give it a little something,
Yeah. Well, yeah. So now, the publicity's changed so much. So in the past, you would just hit radio stations, hit TV stations, etc. And now there's a lot of digital and promotion. So what do you think about that shift?
You mean like trying to get people on podcasts and online things?
Yeah, like promotion for you. I mean,
yeah, no, I think it's great. It's just more additional. It used to be, it's been a while now because broadcast is fragmented so much that it used to be you'd get an article in a paper like the Tribune or the Sun-Times, you'd get a good placement in the entertainment, and it would sell, the phones would be off the hook. Who reads papers anymore?
Right.
Even online, you get an article there. It's just a lot of times it's more difficult to find. So you just got to find where the people are. In a lot of cases, we're encouraging comics to develop their social media. We are, because like I said before, that's where people have already expressed an interest in you.
But I mean, how do you feel about the change, in the media?
It's just a natural, it went from radio to TV at one point to now it's going from radio and broadcast to podcast and streaming. It's just part of the evolution. We're just ride the wave, man, and try to stay abreast of what the changes are. So if you're just like, well, I'm just going to try to get things in the newspaper because that's what the old press agents of Broadway would do in the 50s. Well,
right.
You've got to try to find the new things where the people are, and that may be TikTok. Mm-hmm. It may be, or it may be a podcast. There's a ton of podcasts in Chicago, but there's not a ton that have huge numbers
right
at this point. But I think that's going to be changing because there's some really good ones out there. And I don't want to name them to upset others, but there's some really good ones. I will name yours. I like yours.
Thank you.
And
that means a lot. I know you're not just saying that because you are very critical and you know a lot about content. You're very opinionated. So
yeah, no, you do a good job. You found something you were interested in, something you had an expertise in, and it was an underserved thing, and you created something very very vital.
Yeah, and also I just have a passion about the business of media. It just keeps me going because I always tell the students this too, in order to keep podcasts going, you really have to have an interest in your subject matter, no matter what happens. But
well, right. I mean, you're not rich, are you, doing your podcast?
no, I don't make
Exactly.
anything.
Nobody is. Nobody. Well, there's a few. Your Marins and there's a few who are.
Right.
But you're doing this because you're passionate about it. You're passionate about your subject. You're passionate about your guests.
Mm-hmm.
So learn your skills, and then maybe you can move it on to a bigger platform at some point.
Well, and also, but it has helped me, thanks to you, Rick, because I started doing
me.
Yeah, because a long time ago, you hooked me up with a library to do a podcast seminar, a workshop, and then I did other ones, again, thanks to you, because people knew people, and then now I'm teaching at Columbia, so it's really because of you. See, you're one of my few mentors in the media. No, seriously, you and a couple other people. Yeah, I don't really.
That
one of
means
these people
a lot to me to say that, and then I do remember that was a good. I mean, you did a good job, and it was a pretty well attended seminar that you did at the Carroll Stream Public Library.
Yeah, and then I went to Winfield, then I went to Elgin, and then. But yeah, it's really because a lot of some people are lucky and they do have mentors. But I've sort of there's certain people that just sort of help me out. They're not a lot, but a few people like you and a couple other. But I was going to say.
Well, when we were working together and, I don't know, I always enjoyed conversations with you. So it wasn't like, we just have a good time chatting about the business, and you wanted to learn something. I wanted to learn something. And I think it's been a nice relationship. So,
yeah. And then also, I was going to say that I do know somebody who was doing a podcast. They started a podcast and they got the attention of the Chicago Tribune. And their podcast became so popular because of that Tribune article. And they got a sponsor and they have all this exposure. And they were even told, by the person who wrote the article, they said, your life has changed, hasn't it? I said, yeah. So, the Tribune does have some weight. Like, I'm sure.
Oh, no, I shouldn't. I didn't mean to diminish the Tribune, because I want stuff. Yeah, it's just you've got to temper your expectations.
Yeah, and it's not the only way anymore. Like getting in the Chicago Magazine, Chicago Tribune, et cetera, is not the only way, like it used to be.
And the trouble I face sometimes, because a comedian, usually a non-famous one, or they may have a couple TV credits, or they'll come and go, how come I'm not on a bunch of radio and TV here? I'm like, well, because this is Chicago.
Right.
Well, when I was in Knoxville,
right,
I was on the rock and roll station and the talk station, and I was on the morning TV station. I'm like, what else is going on in Knoxville?
Right.
There's a lot of other stuff going on in Chicago, and I hate, and again, I hate to do this to some people, but sometimes when they push you, it's like, well, you got to be more famous.
Yeah. Chicago's a huge city.
Yeah. And as you know, working in the media, and the way things are rated now, that if they're not seeing, positive movement, they're not going to put an iffy guest on, so, and it's like, oh no, we put on an iffy guest once before. We only have to, we want home run hitters.
Yeah. And it's also, that's true about music too. But yeah, because I wrote a book, and I was sort of got some attention, but
that book?
Yeah, Wicker Park Wishes. Yeah, I know I need some PR help, but I still have not, even though it's about Chicago, it's from the 90s.
Wait a minute, I still don't have an autograph in mind.
Wait, yeah, okay, when I see you, we have to have breakfast again, because we used to go. What's that place we used to go to? I don't know if it's still open in the West Loop. I forgot.
Oh, Lou Mitchell's.
Yeah, is that place is still?
Yeah,
is that place still open?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, we should meet there. Now that COVID's better. Yeah, but speaking of COVID, like I never had a book launch because of COVID. I was too worried about it.
Yeah, you're doing something coming up, I thought I saw.
Yeah, next month I'm going to do this 90s thing at a bar. I'm going to send out posting more information about it. But but yeah, like even with literature, it's really, really, really hard to get attention for it in Chicago. And certain people are quote unquote lucky. I'm not saying they're not talented. They are talented, but certain people are picked up and certain people aren't. So Chicago's tough. It's a huge city. They want certain things.
Yeah. Then that's something I face, trying to promote. I would love to get every comedian we have on some sort of TV or radio. It's just not going to happen. Just not going to happen. There's not enough airtime, and most of the guests, most of the performers, unfortunately, just aren't there yet where a Chicago station would want them on as a guest at this point, you know.
Well, now
So,
what's some advice do you have for getting on other podcasts, like that you give people?
well, know the host. Wink, 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 wink.
Right.
Well, that's the thing. So many comedians, and that's kind of almost became a joke in some, because so many comedians had podcasts. They would all be on each other's podcasts. So,
Right.
but that's the way to do it. Just start. And if you want, and if you have a certain thing you're trying to promote and or get people to be aware of, try to figure out a podcast, or this is appropriate with any other media. That's something that you think people who are into what you're into would perhaps be interested in it.
Yeah. And then also now, I mean, we talk so much about zanies and comedy and promotion, but now that you've been away from radio during the pandemic, do you see your career differently?
I do. But I always, I mean, the foundation is that I worked in radio. I worked in it from 1987 to, just a couple of years ago. That's always been the foundation. And because of that, and because of the relationships I built with people like you or others in Chicago and throughout the country, because I worked in other states and other cities before I came back to Chicago, these relationships have been very important to what I'm doing right now. Before I came to Chicago, I was in Indianapolis, and I was hosting a news talk show. I was producing a sports show. I was producing the Indiana Pacers radio network.
Wow.
And I was a producer on the Bob and Tom radio show. Bob and Tom, they're Radio Hall of Fame.
All at once you were doing this?
Oh, yeah. I was doing, all, like the Pacers thing was, just during basketball season. I would do the two, the sport, that I would host the one talk show, and then immediately we went into the sports show. So then I would put a producer cap on, and then I would do things in the morning on the Bob and Tom show, and I would track down guests for them. But as it turned out, because knowing the Bob and Tom people, I've been able, and they have, one of the things they were so successful in is the way they utilize comedians. And I learned a lot from them. And I stay in contact with them. I still talk to them pretty regularly. And because of that experience has helped me to work with comics, because there are a lot of comics who are on the show, and I'm like, oh yeah, I used to work on that. They're like, oh, okay. Well, it's kind of like, it opens the door a little bit to the relationship. And in fact, one of the Bob and Tom, one of their contributors is a character named Donnie Baker. And when I worked there, Donnie was my intern.
Wow.
And now he's a stand-up comedian, and he just headlined Zanies a few weeks back. So.
Nice. Now, how you're saying that how they use comedians? How did they use comedians?
Well, they understood that, it's like so many shows don't. It's like the old Johnny Carson thing, in that they would get interesting, funny people on the show, and it didn't matter if they were funnier than the host. Didn't matter, because people wouldn't necessarily know the name. So when I was there, the comics we were working with who weren't famous yet were Tim Allen, Jeff Foxworthy, Brad Garrett, Drew Carey, George Lopez. These are all people I was working with. And it didn't matter that they were funnier than the show sometimes, because people didn't remember the comics' names. They just remember there was something funny going on the Bob and Tom show today.
Nice.
There was something funny and interesting going on Johnny Carson last night. We're going to have to watch tonight.
Nice.
So I've always carried that with me,
Hmm.
that, don't be afraid to have funny people around you, people who are smarter than you, people who are more experienced than you. Kind of like I told you when I was about Russell Peters. When he travels throughout the world, he'll bring these really strong comedians with him. He's not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
He just knows it's going to be a better show.
I didn't even know that people would be afraid of that, even just radio hosts, because it just helps.
Oh, there are some shows and some shows in Chicago that they would not like comedians on because they wanted to be the funniest in the room.
Because it just makes the show better. It's entertainment. So
well, right, but again, it's the entertainment business, and there are, in some cases, some people have fragile egos. Yeah. So, and some of these hosts do, and it's not just radio; it's TV too. But I'm not finding that as much anymore, or more recently than in maybe about 5 years ago.
Now, what's TV like when you go to these sets? How's it different from radio?
Oh, TV is great. Nowadays, the way things are, TV really sells tickets for us in a lot of cases. So, the king, of course, is the WGN TV morning news.
Oh, yeah.
And do you watch that?
Oh, yeah. I watch it because my husband has been watching it for a while. So he has it on often.
Well, that's like the number one placement. If you can get somebody on that, it's going to do well.
It's generally very well produced. It is so entertaining. It's like old school. Not that it's old fashioned, but they have a vision to make it multifaceted.
Right. It's like, come on, kids, we're going to put on a show.
Yeah, exactly.
They're ready to be themselves, to be Chicago, where so many, as so many broadcast execs. It's like, let's do a carbon copy in every one of our markets so we can sell it easier. Right. But that doesn't always make things more entertaining. WGN is a monster. The WGN TV morning news. Yeah. It is,
and they have fun segments, They
have very fun segments, and they're willing to play. And so many of the comedians, a lot of that I'll bring there, they want to be on that show. They'll ask to be on that show. There was, Jim Gaffigan, right? The comedian.
Yeah.
Always sells out Chicago theater multiple nights. I worked on his very first TV special as a local publicist in 2005. And he came to me then, and his manager, I knew his manager, and he said, I want two things and I'll be happy. I want an article about me in the Tribune. Uh-huh. And I want to be on the Channel 9 Morning News, because he hadn't been on either.
Wow.
And I got him both.
Nice.
And he was thrilled. And because of that, the relationship with Channel 9 and Jim Gaffigan, he sells out the Chicago theater for three nights in a row. He doesn't have to do, but he'll come to town, and he'll always return to go to that show, because he knows that they were good to him. Melissa Villasenor, do you know her from Saturday Night Live? She just left Saturday Night Live. She does all kinds of impressions. Very funny. Before she was even on Saturday Night Live, she was posting herself doing impressions on social media. And we booked her at Zanies. We had her. And WGN put her on just because they like impressionists. Nice. And she was a good, and that relationship has continued. So then she is, a star on Saturday Night Live, and she'd still, when she come to town, she's like, hey, can you get me on? We're like, yes, we will.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Well, yeah, if I were to ever pursue something and my goal, and I needed TV media, and I made it to WGN, I've made it. That's an incredible place. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's it's like, like Channel 9 right now has a really good show on afterwards called Daytime Chicago. I'll be
Yeah,
bringing
that's
a guest
really
there.
good. I
I'll be
love
bringing a
Tanya
guest there tomorrow.
I
Yeah,
love Tanya Francisco. Can you tell her that?
I will.
I'm a huge
Radio
fan.
Girl loves you,
Yeah, I would
Tanya.
love to interview her. I'm a huge.
Okay.
I mean, no, her
Yeah.
and also the other woman she's on the air with is great too. But I've been
Amy
following.
Rutledge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I've been following Tanya Francisco. Like I feel like a nerd, but I've been following her career here in Chicago, and I just think she's great. So I'm glad that she landed that.
Yeah, it's a great, but then there's other shows too that are, the morning show on WFLD TV
Oh
has
yeah,
been pretty successful for us as well when we
that's
get
good.
guests there.
Yeah.
So now the other shows, like the network stations, so Channel 2, 5, and 7, because they have the national morning shows.
Right.
They generally don't do guests, or if they do, it's more like we've got a run here or we've got some sort of an event.
Yeah, it's
So,
usually just news. It's a news situation.
yeah.
But then
So,
I have a question. Are you always networking? Because it seems like you always connect with people.
always, yeah, always trying to.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you never know. And you know what? And it started so early. I mentioned Mike Toomey. Mike Toomey is one of my old friends, or, their Channel 9 Morning News. Mike Toomey is on the Channel 9 Morning News. He's one of my oldest friends. Here's a picture of us.
Yeah, speaking of that, speaking of that,
We went to, I'm in the middle in a tuxedo. Mike's
that's funny.
Elwood Blues.
Wow.
There's Rennie Rulas. Yeah.
But it's funny because it seems like you have a picture of yourself with everybody. You'll be like, oh, so-and-so's birthday. Here's a picture of me with them. What's up with that?
I just try to take pictures with everybody,
Yeah.
I just like it. And now, I mean, even when I started, everybody didn't have, we all had cell phones, but we didn't really have the smartphones. So it didn't take good pictures.
Mhm.
So you'd have to bring, so there were a number of people that I never had my picture taken with, so it was like, I never, Kevin Hart, I worked with him all the time.
Mhm.
So I never had my picture. Craig Ferguson, Bill Burr, guys like that. I would love to have had pictures with them, but it just doesn't happen all the time. But and then the other thing is when you're doing the media runs and you're at you never know
That's true.
what other celebrities you're going to meet along the way.
Yeah.
Because there's been times where we're at a TV studio or radio studio, and there's the bass player from the Rolling Stones, or there is Bob Saget, or there is an astronaut, or you never know.
Right. Now, have you always been like that? You're Mr. Networker?
Yeah. I've always been a connector. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know where it came from.
Yeah, it's a gift.
It came from.
Well, it's a gift because
Just,
you always hook people up, or people, or do you hand out your card, or what do you do? How do you connect with people?
yeah, you just give them your phone number. It's like, nobody wants cards anymore. So,
Right.
And the lucky thing, my son he's a college graduate. He's not in the media, but he's learned a lot of that, and he's very good at that as well.
Wow.
He's very good.
He graduated from college already. I remember when he was a kid.
Yeah, he graduated last December, and he works in the sciences, but he's very good at tracking down people to try to maybe get job interviews and different things. Yeah, right now he's traveling. He's doing DNA research on bats.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, as a high school kid, he used to go on WGN radio and talk about bees because he was a beekeeper, and he would talk about the importance of pollinators.
Nice. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what is a good way to connect with people? I mean,
be genuine, be interested.
Mm-hmm.
You never know who's going to become important in your life. Now, like I showed you the picture of Mike Toomey. We grew up behind each other.
Wow.
I didn't know he was going to be a stand-up comedian and then a member of the Channel 9 Morning News, but we were friends. We had common things happen in our lives. I always wanted to be in radio. I just had my 40th high school reunion a couple of weeks back. I was looking through yearbooks, and one of the yearbooks from when I was a freshman. So how old are you, a freshman? 13 or 14 years old. Somebody wrote, I think you can make it as a DJ. So
That's
I
fine.
always wanted to be in radio.
Mhm.
So um, you just need to be interested in and willing to share that information with others as well. It's like, because it would be selfish of me to have a great friend and a resource and a contact like you, but then if somebody else could utilize, the information you have, why wouldn't I share that? And you may need somebody, and I may know someone else, and I'll share that with you, because someone's going to do that for me too.
But how do you deal with haters and so forth?
Haters are going to hate, and then what T Swift says,
Right,
So,
right.
no, you just got to let it roll off your back a little bit, I mean, not that it doesn't, it doesn't hurt if people are being mean, obnoxious, hateful. It's just, you can't let that stop you from your journey, don't let, just get rid of it. Get rid of it. I think, sometimes, and I'm sounding like I'm fine, there are times when you'll get something that's just like, son of a I
Right.
cannot believe, and then you'll dwell on it and you'll stew over it, and it will stop you from your forward progress. So you just,
But then what do you do with, because you're saying like you help people and they help, like, what do you do with people who are not helpful? They're just sort of like what
well,
they say,
sooner or
pull up the
later they
ladder.
fall off, sooner or later. I mean, you can only, there's only so much you can give, and it's like, wait a minute, this needs to be a two-way street. But generally, I think most people, at least most people are pretty generous.
Yeah.
Like in comedy, I've worked with so many young comics who are now successful comics, and a lot of times, if I'm doing a charity event or something, I'll contact some of them, and some of them, if it fits into their schedule, they'll participate.
Yeah.
And that's because I was there for them, and now they're there for me. And not that you're doing things always just because you want something. You're just trying to be pleasant and nice. Show business is really hard. It's
Yeah, I agree.
really hard. It's really difficult. And radio's part of that. TV's part of it. But live stand-up comedy is so hard. If you can help people along the way to move them to the next level,
Mhm.
I say you got to do it. You see those signs that if you can only be one thing, be kind. There's some truth to it. I mean, it's a little corny, but if you can be helpful, be helpful.
Yeah. Well, and also another thing is, it's true, like what goes around comes around, because, there may be somebody out there who's very selfish and so forth, but if you're doing it, it can help you down the road anyway,
Well, right. And there are some selfish people and people who are not helpful, but you still want to network with them because
Right.
of whatever, and maybe they'll come around at some point.
So what are some notable connections that you've made, that something surprising happened? Can you think of anything? Like something surprising in a way?
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, like, so for instance, you knew so and so and so knew somebody else, and then it resulted in something really good happening, and you just didn't expect it.
Well, okay. Here's the thing. I went. Here's the thing that because I knew Mike Toomey throughout my broadcasting career, I got to know a lot of different comedians, and a lot of times they would ask me about getting on radio or TV or so I would share information with them. So, and then that sometimes was, and some of these comedians, then as I started working with Zanies exclusively, they remembered that. But one night before I was working with Zanies, I was working for another club. So this was in the early 2000s, maybe around 2002. And I went to Zany's on it was a holiday party for my wife's company. It was just there, and there was a comedian there, and I just thought she was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I'd like to maybe see if I could get her some media placements. And so I started doing some work with her and got her some media placements, some significant media placements in Chicago. And then the owner of Zany's saw what I was doing, and he then said, "Hey, do you want to work on the Jim Gaffigan TV special?"
Wow.
So I got that. And then he was like, "Well, you did such a good job, and Jim was so happy with that. Would you come work for me?"
Wow.
So
That's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another in radio. Here's one for radio, in that I had worked in Maine for about a year and a half, and I just kind of had enough of being in the middle. And it was a small town radio, and it was fun, and I learned a lot. But I wanted to move on.
Right.
And so I left without having another job, which was a mistake. But I was listening.
People should always have.
Exactly. But I was young. I was listening to AM 1000, and it was Dan, or was it AM 1000 or the Loop at that time? I think it was the Loop. And Dan McNeil, who was the producer and co-host with Chet Kopic, was on the air. And I said, I'm going to meet him.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Sunday. So I drove down had no idea who he was. He had no idea who I was. Went down to the Hancock building. I was able to get in, and I met him.
Nice.
I met him. We kept up the relationship that he told me about a job in Indianapolis, which I got.
Nice.
And then I was able to, but then I was working with him because he was thinking of going to Indianapolis at that point. But it didn't work out. And then we still stayed in touch through the whole thing, because he then told me about the Score. And it was because of him I got the job at the Score.
Nice.
All because of networking and being willing to be nice to people.
Nice. That's nice. Now, another thing is, one thing I noticed is some people get ahead because of how they look or whatever. I mean, have you noticed that too? That they're not necessarily talented, but
Hold on just a second. I lost your volume. I don't know what's going on. Talk to me.
Oh no, can you hear me?
Yeah. I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I'm sorry. And you were saying?
No, just that that I was wondering if you, like, what I've noticed too, especially in entertainment, is certain people get ahead because of how they look, and they're not, I'm sure you've seen this, but it's not necessarily how the person, if they have talent or so forth, it's really just completely superficial. Have you seen that kind of stuff in entertainment?
Well, it is. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I've seen it a lot. Especially in television, you see it, and that's unfortunate, but, I mean, but it is a visual medium. So I guess.
Right. Of course. Yeah. I mean, you need to look a certain way. I mean, in my opinion,
you should always kind of dress for the role, put on your uniform. I'm not a suit and tie guy, but in some cases you got to put a suit and tie on.
Right.
But I think, people are losing out on some potentially very good talent by just offhand saying no uglies,
right.
Whatever, or no men or no women or whatever, however
right.
they, it's like, let's listen, let's watch, let's read, whatever medium you're
Yeah,
in.
that's right. Yeah. So anything else you'd like to share now that we've talked for over an hour?
Ugh.
We last talked.
No. I just think this has been a nice conversation. It's nice to check in with you. Do you listen to any of what do you listen to in the market? Do you listen to much?
Oh gosh, I'm working all day and night. I'm thinking, well, I guess I've been watching more TV lately. So like WGN Morning News, WGN,
Yeah.
the show after that, but let me think. Well, I mean, I really like I like John Williams on WGN.
Okay.
He's really good.
Yeah.
He's really good. I mean, basically, I really like his style, and if for some reason he won't do a podcast, I have no idea. But I like how he has a point of view, but he's also entertaining and he's also open, and he asks good questions, and it's sort of a fun time. But yeah, that's the main person I notice I'm listening to. But I'm working all day and night. Like I work all day and night 3 days a week, and then the other days I'm working all day. So
Yeah. You know what show I've been listening to a lot lately is Wait, Don't Tell Me.
oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And a lot of the comedians on there are people I work with because they've got some locals as well as nationals.
Right.
And
That's a popular show.
it's a popular show. And it's kind of like a throwback in a lot of ways to like old time shows, to me at least, but with a kind of a modern, more of a hip, educated spin,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, NPR has really great stuff. I mean, just their shows, they put a flag down in podcasting years and years and years ago, and they developed incredible podcasts, and they're sophisticated, and then other people caught up, but by that time they were way ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I listen to that stuff. I listen to I go to their site, listen on demand. But yeah, but also, there's not a lot of local shows anymore. I mean, a lot of it's syndicated, and it just sounds sort of similar. Some of the syndicated
Well,
stuff.
that's one of the things, like we were talking about Channel 9 Morning News. I mean, here it is, local, live,
Right.
and truly Chicago and Chicago area, just the way they do it all, and they should be doing more of that on radio as well,
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess anything else you want to say?
No. Is there something you want me to say?
No, I mean, I think I asked all the questions, and I didn't want to repeat everything that we talked about.
Oh, no. I love though that the pandemic has got us doing stuff like this with the Zoom things.
Yeah.
Never, it's just so interesting. And I love when you'd watch different podcasts or news shows or something and you see a celebrity, it humanizes to me in that instead of having like a fancy studio,
Right.
so many people, just like I have right now, like I'm using, here, you can't see, I'm using boxes of puzzles,
Right.
right, to hold my stuff.
Yeah, neat. Yeah. Well, then also another thing is, I mean, I do like Zoom and everything, but I still like real interactions in real life. It's like working in person is way better than working online.
Oh, of course. But it's just interesting in media like that here you got these celebs like Mandy Patinkin. He's like doing it on Amazon boxes when he does. Yeah.
Oh, that's
I just
true,
think it's funny.
That's true.
I just think it's funny. So
yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna stop this right now.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and
thank you,
and hope you're well. Let's go to breakfast or lunch or dinner soon.
Yeah, we should. And then